So uh, I've, been, I've been asked to record this, so I'm just going to sort of say it again that if you want to use OneDrive, then what you will do is you'll navigate to office.com. Now, when I navigate to office.com, I'm automatically sort of opening up my account in office.com. This is my account. When you try to open up office.com, it'll ask you for login credentials. And I hope that you've got those. I'm not, to be honest, I'm not sure what they are, but we can find out for you. But everybody at the college has an account with Office, so that you can use all of these cloud-based applications. So when I say cloud-based applications, you don't have to have Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneDrive, etc., installed separately on your computer to use these. You can log in with your account and then have access to these. Now, for me, I do have those things, and I actually bought my own Office 365 account. So I have two Office 365 accounts. One's with work and one's my own, and I do that so that I can use it at home. Yeah, maybe just I waste money, right? I don't know, but there it is. So the thing about Office 365, when it does slow your computer down a bit, right? If you have it opening up into that account every day, I noticed that it does lengthen the time that it takes me to open up my computer, because I have it in the startup. I have Office there, and the reason I have Office in the startup is so that I can use Teams. You can see Teams here. Teams is part of Office 365, and Teams allows you to do things that we're doing in Zoom, in a Microsoft Office kind of way. Because so in some ways it's kind of cooler than Zoom, because it has built into it this a bit more enhanced version of the chat. Of course, we can chat in Zoom, but Office, you've got a chat where you can sort of add all kinds of things to it, like you do with your other more enhanced things. So we have a chat there. The other thing that we have is we can go from Teams to these other applications kind of seamlessly, so that we can share things. So we can go from Teams directly to our OneDrive. Now, OneDrive, there's many different versions of online storage capacity, things that you can use. I use Dropbox for my own personal things, but OneDrive, because of my college account with Office 365, I'm using OneDrive to share things with other people in the college system. Now, I'm not going to use it with you because I find it a bit clunky, to be honest. I'm not going to put everything up there on OneDrive, but you know, you will find other teachers will, and I like to stick with one sort of application, and the application that I think is sort of central to what we're doing is D2L. And so that's where all the work's going to be, and that's where you're going to put your work. I'm not going to ask you to put up on OneDrive, but you will have other teachers that will ask you to do that, and they'll share things with you on OneDrive, and they'll ask you to share things on OneDrive. But as I said, I like to keep things in one place. Why do it in 5 different places, right? So here's my OneDrive. I have a little menu up here that I can sort of go back to all of the other different applications that are there from Microsoft. So it's a pretty nice suite of things that we can use. It is very sort of redundant to other tools that are out there. As I said, so Teams does a lot of the stuff that Zoom does. Well, these other things, yeah. OneDrive does stuff that Dropbox does. And to be fair about that, that's kind of been a Microsoft sort of business way of doing business for the last like 40 years. Is they drive their application suite to sort of gobble up other companies that do something pretty good. They'll buy their stuff or buy them and put them out of business. So like, for example, Excel, there used to be a computer program that was by a company, Lotus 123, and they had like the world's best spreadsheet, right? And then Microsoft sort of came and bought them out and took them out and outcompeted them. And so nobody uses Lotus 123 now, right? Likewise, I mean, the Microsoft, we're using Edge. Some of us are using, well, Google sort of took over from a company, and Google added applications, added functions to its browser, right? I mean, the original browser, we used to use this thing called Netscape, and it was really kind of cool. But then Google came up with a browser and a search engine, which was just knocked everybody out of the water. So, I mean, we've had this sort of, how you say, monopolization going on in the IT industry, and you can read books about that if you're interested. It's not sort of tech stuff, it's sort of business stuff, but that's probably where we're going. So I would always keep an eye on what Microsoft is doing. Don't ignore their applications, because you might be faced with a situation where it's the only application you're able to use. So yeah, definitely get familiar with them. And so, and well, on that point, that's the application that we're using today is Excel. Now I have Excel in two different versions kind of going on here, right? I could open the Excel here from the cloud and just sort of work with that. It's a little bit not quite as full featured, or I could have Microsoft Office installed onto my computer. And actually, using it from the cloud, I can start using it from the cloud and then install from there onto my computer if I have the rights to do that. Of course, all of us would have those rights. Most people buy it when they buy their computer. Like if you bought your computer from a computer store here, they probably say, well, for an extra 500 reals, we'll sell you Microsoft Office. And some of you say, nah, I can get a rip-off copy of it. Well, that's a bad idea, because then you don't have any support. Or some of you might just say, well, what I'll do is when I'll get home, I'll go online to the Microsoft website and I'll buy the package myself that way. And that's a good idea. And then you might buy Office 365, and then you've got this all there. So anyways, I'm talking a lot about that one. Let's look at Excel. So this is Excel. I have Excel open. And what you'll notice is at the top there, we have this ribbon, which is familiar to you if you've, in some way, I think at least, because the way that the menus are aligned there at the top of the screen, and we've got all of these icons and things that we can pull down and sort of get bigger menus out of. So if I click on that, I get a whole lot of things here that I can work with here, just pulling down from that there. I also have drop-down menus. When I click on that, the ribbon changes. So nice. Okay, now the reason why I'm starting with that is because this is the same kind of idea, because it's the same company that you're going to see if you use Microsoft Word. You'd be familiar with the way that they have set out their menus. So the file menu, that's the same in almost all Microsoft products. Likewise with the home, and then these others may be a little bit different. So some of these menus, they work on the whole page, and some of these menus work on an individual cell at a time. Now, the other thing I should say about Office Excel is that just like Microsoft Word or any of those other packages, usually there's more than one way of doing things. So you're going to have shortcuts that you can do, with your function key and your control key, whatever. You've got those sort of, and I bet, yeah. So these are, so there's that way of getting menus is with your special keys. So for example, if I wanted to save this at the moment, I could do Control S. That's like a universal of saving things, right? We were doing that with our other applications that weren't Microsoft applications when we were playing around with Notepad, right? So I mean, Control S, that works on like almost all sort of software. So you can familiarize yourself with the sort of shortcut keys like that. Other things that you can do is usually if you're in a cell or a bunch of cells in Excel, and you can do a click and drag, and you can see that I've got that there. I highlight that. Then once you've got a selection of a cell or a bunch of cells, you can right click and you can pull down a menu which will allow you to do things with that selection of cells. So you can see I can copy those cells. I can insert things into those cells. I can sort those cells. I can format those cells just by doing a right click. Now, the other thing I could do is I could have those cells um, uh, highlighted. And if I was in the home menu, then, well, yeah, I can also, so I mentioned you can do things usually more than one way. Well, we've got a format painter. The format painter will do is if you highlight a cell and then click on the format painter, then however that cell is painted is formatted can be that formatting can be transferred to another cell. Can you see the paintbrush there? The paintbrush is the format painter. And so let me just show you what I mean by that. So I have to escape to get rid of the format painter, but let's say that this cell, I made it red by just clicking up here with the red thing and I bolded it. And let's say I made it a bit bigger. Okay, so let's say I like to have that particular way of doing format to be across all of these other cells. Well, I could just go through those 4 steps on each of those cells, or I could say, well, what I'd really like to do is save myself some time. So I'm going to go to the format painter. I'm going to double click and check. Well, maybe just click once. Check, and if I see the paintbrushes there, so I've highlighted this and the paintbrush is there. Now, anywhere where I highlight while I've got that paintbrush active, we'll end up with the same formatting. And so that's kind of a cool thing that you can do. So you don't have to format the same thing over and over again. If you get it right one place, you can sort of just use your format painter to go between. And that actually will work anywhere in your spreadsheet. It'll even work on different sheets. You see here, I have more than one sheet available. And so that's another thing with Microsoft Excel is you can have multiple sheets on the same file, and those sheets can have formula that link them together. It's really, really a powerful tool. So very soft introduction today. I don't want to get into too much sort of technical working a lot with Excel. So let's throw in a little bit of history about spreadsheets generally. I think the year was like 1975. There was an accounting postgraduate student, and he was at Harvard, and he was teaching people accounting. And I don't know if any of you have any friends who were in accounting, like back in 1975, maybe a grandfather or a grand uncle or something like that, or grand aunt or something, because a lot of accountants are also women. But the way that they used to do accounting back in the old days is they would have sheets with values in them, and they would when they changed the value of something that was then used in a summary somewhere else, they would get their pencils out, and all of these sheets, they'd use them with a pencil. And when they did a calculation and changed the number, they'd pull out the eraser, erase that, get their calculator out, and calculate the new value and put them into the cells on this sheet that they had. And they called that an accounting spreadsheet. And so this accounting instructor, really, he was an instructor at a college, very smart young guy. And he basically said, well, you know what, we got these computers now. I bet I could get a computer to do something like that. And so what you're seeing when you see these cells is kind of the idea that was brought up by these accounting people. Basically, he said, well, you know what, I could take a formula and I could I could have a bunch of cells with some numbers in it. I could put a formula beside that, and then from that formula, I could calculate the value and put it in there. So if the values that the formula depended on changed, it would automatically update, and I wouldn't have to go and do the recalculation. So that's a big benefit of having a spreadsheet. Well, let's have a look at this. What do we mean by that? Well, let's say I wanted to calculate. Here we've got a vehicle which has 0.89. I suppose that would be dollars per mile, cost per mile. That's kind of like a cost that is taking into account the original cost of the vehicle and amortizing all of the expenses that go with that actual vehicle. Now, when we what we have recorded is the fact that this vehicle has now gone almost 10,000 miles. And so we should be able to calculate from the miles that have been driven that what is going to be the cost per mile, the mileage cost. And so we could put that in here, and we could do that with a formula. Now, how we would do that, to start doing a formula, I just press the equal key. I'm touching the equal key now. When I touch the equal key, that means that tells Excel that I'm going to start writing a formula. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, I know that if I know the number of miles, so I'm just going to point to it. Excel is so much easier than what those accountants were doing in 1975, I'll tell you. So what I know is I want to put in here, I want to put the miles driven multiplied by the number of by the cost per mile. So I'm just going to click on it to say, look at that. There's the miles driven. Multiply is just the star sign. So I just pressed the star, which sits over top of the 8. So I held down the shift key and the 8 key, and now I'm going to click on that. So, and notice how Excel is so nice. Look at that. It even puts different colors on it, right? And so you see the B4 is in red, and the red here, that's to show that that's this thing. So this is showing, taking this blue number, multiplying it by that red number. And all I have to do is hit enter now, and that formula is in there. It's actually calculated the cost per miles. Now, the really cool thing in Excel that makes this easier. This is what
Sir?
Yes.
First time you press what?
Equal.
For calculate? Equal?
Equal
Okay.
sign. So what makes this cool is it automatically updates. This is the spreadsheet power, right? So what I find out is the guy drove 9,964 miles. Well, then I get another report in, and I find out that, well, actually he drove, that wasn't right. It was 9,672 miles. And so somebody read the odometer wrong. Now watch this number. When I change this number, you see this number automatically recalculates the value. That's the power of Excel. And so it's way more than your sort of playing around calculator. Yes.
What you press when you are selecting 2 rows?
Okay, so if you want to have this formula in this other row, in this other column, is that what you mean? Yeah. Do you notice up here in this cell, it's highlighted? That means that this is the active cell that I'm using at the moment. Now you see the active cell here. You see up here in the editing area, I could change the formula there, and you see the formula is actually written equal C4 times B4, right? We call that formula bar, right? So I've got a formula in this cell, and I can edit it there. But the other thing I've got in this cell is I've got this little square dot down in the bottom right-hand corner. And if I hover over it, do you see that the big cross changes to a little cross? Once it's a little cross, I can click and drag. Now I could drag that way, or I could drag that way, or that way, any way I want. I can click and drag that. And what will happen is whatever's in that cell will be copied to the other area, but it'll be copied in a relative way. So I'm going to click, drag. I'm still holding my cursor down, but if I lift up my finger off the cursor, the copy is done. And so now let's just go and have what happened. So here was the formula, C4 times B4. C4, this is B4, this is C4. C4 is that number times B4, which is that number. If I go to this cell here, well, look, we're now in, well, what are these numbers? The C's, B's, what are they? The letters of the alphabet, that's the columns. The numbers, that's the rows. So C4 times B4. What would this formula be? It should be this number times that number, right? If it's going to be the same type of thing. So that would be C5 times B5. Well, let's check. And in fact, it is C5 times B5. And then the next one is C6 times B6, etc. Just by doing that copy down there, that's the power of this spreadsheet. I mean, you see that I did that so quickly, and it seems so easy. It is easy. And that's the idea of that is it's not even made to be used by computer people. Like I said, this is what's being used by accountants. If you went over to the School of Business, where we're in the School of Business and IT, right? But I mean, if you went over into Building 12 and sat down there in the lectures that they're having, they're going to be doing spreadsheets. Now, they might use them in a slightly different way than we do, but certainly what we did just there, that this is full-on accounting, right? This would be the type of thing that an accountant would do, calculate the total costs and total cost per mile. All right, so what we want is we want the total cost. Now, an accountant would find this really easy to understand. You might not be accountants, so you might not be familiar with the idea of, well, what would be the total cost? So the total cost is your variable costs plus your fixed costs. The variable cost, that changes as the usage of the asset changes. In this case, the usage is based on the miles driven. And so we calculated the variable cost there, and we called it a mileage cost. So as the miles change, the cost changes. We get more cost for more miles. But the total cost includes the variable cost plus a fixed cost. And a fixed, oh no, this is also a variable cost. Well, we don't have our fixed cost, sorry. So we've got another value in there for, which is another variable cost, which is maintenance. No, that's, maintenance is added to the mileage cost. So yeah, so it's like a fixed cost, but I'm sure that that has some impact on the miles. So calculate that. So we'll say that the maintenance is like a fixed cost. It's not changing with the number of miles driven, though we know that underlying it there would be some. If you were smart enough mathematically, you could figure out some relationship between the maintenance and the miles driven. So it does seem a bit strange that this vehicle here that only went 600 miles has more maintenance costs. Okay, so it is independent of the miles driven. So let's go ahead. So to calculate the total cost, we're going to take the variable cost here, our maintenance cost. Sorry, the variable cost, which is our mileage cost. We're going to add it to our maintenance cost. Quite easy. Equal. So again, equal. Do you see up here? Equals coming up. Now I could write the formula here. I don't have to do it by that pointing thing. So there's always more than one way to do things in Excel. So I could say, well, I know what these are. That's going to be, what is that? That's E4 plus D4, right? So I just say D4 plus E4. But why would I do that, right? Because I might have got it wrong. And so I'm just going to highlight that and hit the delete key. Do it again the easier way, which is just by pointing. I know I want to add this, highlight it, put in a plus sign, then highlight the other thing I wanted to add it to, then hit enter. That's the easiest way to do it. And again, I can fill in the entire column just by grabbing that little square at the corner. And I know that these formula are going to be right. Well, you just check one of them to see. Okay, so this should be this number plus that number. This number is E9, and this number is D9. And there it is, E9 and D9. So that's working fine. We're actually sort of doing this thing here right now. The other thing is going to work out the total cost per mile. Total cost per mile, whenever it says per, that means that we're going to have to divide something, right? So we're going to take the total cost and divide it by the miles driven. Now, it's going to be some number slightly bigger than the cost per mile. So what that's another way of you could have calculated this is to take the maintenance cost and divide it by the miles, and then add it to the cost per mile. We could have done that, but let's just do it here. We're going to say it's going to be the total cost divided by the miles driven. I'm going to do that and hit equal sign. Take total cost, highlight. Divided by is just this slash. Do you see that? Just this slash. That means divided by. And then the thing I want to divide it by, which is the number of miles. So F4, going to run out in 10 minutes. F4 divided by C4. Enter. It's kind of not very nicely presented, is it? But that's okay. So there's our cost per mile. Now, we could present that differently. We could present it in, so we've done all of those things. Now, it talks about the auto sum. The totals as indicated in row 13. Now, auto sum is this, sorry, this thing is in the way. This thing here, over here, we got this thing, that Greek symbol there, which is the capital epsilon, I believe. That stands for auto sum. Now, auto sum, if I push on the little down thing to pull up a little menu from auto sum, we got a bunch of things that we can do in auto sum. We can do sum, which is just add everything up. We can do average, count, max, min, and a bunch of other things. So now I pull down that, and doesn't that look cool? We got a lot of things, right? We can do now all of those, hyperlinking, sign function, sum if. This one is an accounting term, which is let's see, present value sort of thing, present value calculation. Now, you also have this cool thing with the if. That will be like lesson 3 or 4. We're going to do these ifs. That's really, really cool. But you could have also got that from this fx over here. This fx means to insert a function. Anyway, so that's our auto sum. Very, very nice. We're going to do an auto sum here, which is we're going to total all of these things. Okay, so total cost per mile, that's kind of a dumb value to calculate. I wouldn't calculate the total cost per mile. I would total, because, and why? Because actually to get that value, it's meaningless, right? To say, why would you add the cost per mile of this and the cost per mile of that? Because they're driving different miles, and it's just a dumb calculation to make. So I'm not going to put that one there. But it does make sense here to calculate the total miles given. So if I highlight that, and then I go to my auto sum, and just by clicking on auto sum, do you see that? What it did is it tried to find, and when I say it, it's not, you know, the computer doesn't think. So what's happening there is that some smart people, some programmers, they wrote an algorithm, and what the algorithm did was said, look to the left, right, above, below, and see if you can find a column or a row of cells. And if you find that, then highlight them if they're numbers, and that will be the range that we'll use for this calculation. So we're going to have the sum of this range of numbers, and all I have to do is hit enter. So sorry, it thinks it's still calculating. Let me do it again. Hit enter, and I get my total value. Now, I know that I want the same for all of these others, except for these things that are per mile, right? Anything per mile, it's just dumb to add them up. They don't do it, all right? Unless you wanted to get an average of it. Now, that's what I would put here. I think an average here would be better. And I think an average here would be better, not total. And so let's do an average. So let's get an average of all of these, right? So the average would be, again, from the auto sum. You see there's an average there. It's going to look for the values. It's a bit of a shame that it's got this value in there. So be careful, and maybe you need to edit it, right? So just check the range. Starts at B4, ends at B13. Well, B13 is this empty one. That's a bad one. We don't want that. So we're going to change that to 12. So now our range is those, and there's our value. Actually, all of these averages are going to be the same. So see, I'm going to click on that with the cross. Oh, there you go. Got all my averages. Very nice. All right, so now we're going to do the highest and the lowest. Same idea. Go to auto sum, and don't choose sum. Choose max. And maybe I better. Sorry, let's escape. That's not what I wanted. So let's try it again. Choose max. Now it's looking, and it doesn't find a good range, right? So I'm going to have to tell it the range. You know what? I wonder if yeah, well, let's just do it. Let's just do the range. It's going to be B4 to B12. So B4, and I'm going to put a colon between, no, it says, yeah, I'm going to put a colon before. I think I can do it that way to B12. And that is now showing the range that I want. And so there's my max value. The maximum cost per mile is 91. And I'm going to copy that across. And so we can see the maximum cost per mile. You can see the average cost per mile. It's all working out very nicely, thanks. And lastly, and the maximum number of miles driven was that number, 900. Somebody drove that as the first one, right? The maximum maintenance cost was almost 500. There it is. The maximum mileage cost was 860, and that was the first one. The maximum total cost was the first one. the average cost per mile, 1.6. Oh, sorry, that's the high. The average cost per mile is 0.81. All right, so the last one we need to do is the lowest. Same idea exactly. Now, as I said, in Excel, oh, I'm going to run out of time too. Okay, I got 4 minutes. In Excel, everything you can do it more than one way. And so I've been showing you clicking on the auto sum. All right, if you had memorized these formula, you would just know that we've got this thing called min. All right, and so not a plus, should have been equal. So equal min. So then I open a bracket. This I think is better because I can point and click. There's always more than one way to do things, right? And we see the formula coming up the way here. And so that's kind of how I would do it. Because if you know the formula, you don't need to go over here and find it. So I know that I want the minimum, so I'm just going to say equal min. And if I want to check, if I want to say, you know, I like that formula, but I don't like going over there to auto sum, what's the formula? I can check anytime by highlighting the cell. I can see the formulas there. Formula always shows up in the formula block. And so there's our min. That's working nicely. All right, so the other thing is that it talks about word wrap on the headings. Here's the headings. They're kind of ugly. And so to make them so that they line up within the columns nicely, word wrap. And so that just is there, wrap that. So something about the comma style. We want the comma style, basically an accounting style for numbers. So when we want to highlight, when we want to style numbers, we can do it two ways. We can do the right click and go to format cells, or we could find it up here. But I mean, the easiest way is just from here. And so we look at number and find one that's got commas in it. All right. Or we could take a currency. Currency sort of has commas in it already, but currency is going to put a dollar or some other symbol there for you. So I'll just choose numbers and make sure that I choose the commas. And the commas will come at anytime there's a 1,000 or anything like that. And so I hope that I highlighted all of those. Yeah, so I got all my comments in there. So that was that. Apply conditional. Oh, we're running out of time. So maybe some of this we'll have to do next time. Conditional formatting so that the cells are the greater value than what. Yeah, we're going to do that next time. Let's leave that. I wasn't really supposed to do this all with you today. I'm not even going to ask you to submit this today. Next lesson, we'll look at that again. And we'll do those other things. I mean, unless you really wanted to do those. I see I got 1 minute and 22 seconds left. So somewhere you're supposed to put your name and student number.
Sir,
Yes.
should we create this table?
Yes. No, you don't have to create the table. Download it from D2L. So you see there's a link to it. Just download. And when you download that, it gives you this. All you have to do is make the changes. So no, you do not need to create the table. The table will come and it'll have these 3 columns in it. You have to put these numbers in, but you don't do that by typing. You do it by putting the formula in. So just work on that so far. Next lesson, we'll sort of finish off this and we'll talk about conditional formatting and some other stuff like that. How's that sound, folks? Okay, because we've got less than 1 minute. So I'm just going to sort of finish up there. 40 seconds, it says. Any quick question that I can answer in 40 seconds?
Sir?
Yes.
We have to wait to tomorrow to understand everything. Then we submit it.
I think you should. Well, you don't have to submit it tomorrow, today, but I think you should start working on it. Yeah.
Okay.